What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Bridging the Geekdoms. I am your host, Robert Slavinsky, and today on the show is something that I've been looking forward to for about a week or two now since I reached out to him to have him come on the show. I am very passionate about the Release the Snyder Cut movement. I got into it a little bit later than a lot of other people did, but that doesn't make my passion for it any less. And having this guest on the show to talk about a book that he is writing about that movement is absolutely incredible. I love what I'm able to do with this podcast. I love what I'm able to bring all of you. I hope you all enjoy what I've been doing. You know, I know that I've been talking a lot about DC stuff over the past couple months, but that's kind of the big news. That's the big thing going on right now. I've said it before, when Marvel starts to announce things and starts revealing things, I will be all over it. But right now, DC is the talk of the town, and that is what we are going to continue talking about until it's not. And today, I'm not going to bear the lead anymore. I have Sean O'Connell, the author of the Release the Snyder Cut book, on the show, and we sit down and we discuss and talk about that book and the movement and how important it is. I cannot wait for this book to come out, but it was just an absolute joy and pleasure to have Sean on the show with me today. So please sit back and enjoy the conversation I have with Sean. What's going on, everyone? With me today is movie fan, podcast host, managing director of Cinemablend, and more importantly, the author of the upcoming Release the Snyder Cut book, Sean O'Connell. How's it going, man?
That's a lot of labels. I didn't realize I had all those names or those things attached to my name, but I guess I do. I guess I do at this point.
I'm pretty sure I saw a lot more than that. I kind of wanted to bring it a little, to condense it a little bit. But what's going on, man? I mean, there's a lot going on in the world, but you're kind of being a busy man despite all the COVID-19 stuff. You've been working on something pretty cool. So how's it going?
It's going really well. I am so thankful to have stayed busy during this difficult time, because I know that there's, especially in my industry, we've been ground to a halt, and so much of the conversation lately has just been, when can we get back to a form of normalcy where everybody still feels safe? I miss movies, man. I miss going to see new films. I miss being able to discuss them on Cinemablend, speculate what's coming. Mm-hmm. And even with all of that, even with everything that's sort of been halted, we have really exciting things happening in the DC universe, in the Marvel universe. DC in particular, they're ramping up for that DC fandom, man. That's going to be an incredible event.
Absolutely. I'm with you. I like every time I hear about, theaters are going to be opening up, at first it was like July 14th, and then it got pushed back to the end of July, and then it was August. And I just want to see Tenet. Just let me see Tenet. Let's see that right now.
Nolan wants you to see it. Believe me. He's doing everything he can to get theaters going back open again.
Yeah. And I can't wait. I'm with you. I just can't wait to get back to the theater, being able to see movies. I mean, my podcast was built on talking about movies. Mm-hmm. So we've had to adjust over the past 3 months ourselves here. And, we've kind of changed the way that we do things. We're talking about people who are who are in the geekdoms or in the nerd world, but bridging things together. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because you have you're on a podcast, you work at Cinemablend, and so you're kind of ingrained with the nerd world, but you kind of molded it into being able to now do this book that you're doing. Mm-hmm. Now, before we dive into the book, I want to find out where you came from. Like, how did you get to where you're at prior to the book? So to Cinemablend and everything like that.
Yeah, sure. I just grew up loving all of this stuff that I'm covering on a regular basis. And I say this often, it's kind of ridiculous that they've allowed me to make a career out of this. Like, I've been very lucky that movies, which I loved movies growing up. I was one of those kids that rode their bike to the local video store to just take out, stacks of VHS tapes and bring them home and watch them and everything, every genre. I watched Westerns, rom-coms, silent films, went through a horror period, obviously, that, most teenagers do. I just love stories. And so I'm an avid reader. But film is definitely the medium that I like to absorb stories in. And I'm fascinated by the way that people tell stories. But one of the things that I always collected and followed and read religiously was comics. So the fact that the love of both of those things have combined during what I obviously think is the golden age of comic book films, I've been extremely lucky from that point of view, because from every studio, they're all trying to. First, it was get into the game of making superhero films. Now it's staying in the game, but it's also developing it, building it out, turning it into something that can sustain everything from a Logan, made by someone of James Mangold's character to the way that the MCU was built over 20 some odd films to now the DCEU crossing over from theaters to streaming, and it's the potential is endless. And I love that there's so many exciting visionary storytellers taking their swing in the comic book world.
I agree. I'm with you on that 100%. I mean, myself growing up, my first movie I ever went to, I was about 4 years old. I went and saw 1989 Batman. And while I fell asleep in the theater on my mom's lap, it stuck with me. I remember when it came out on VHS, my brother and I, we ran downstairs in the morning. His friend went and picked it up from the local small mom and pop video store for us and dropped it off in the morning in the door. And my brother and I sat in the door, by the door in the morning, just waiting anxiously to get that movie. And to me, that was what started my love for film, was that movie right there. And
it's a good one.
Oh yeah. And I never got into the comic books like you're saying you did. I was a comic book fan. I didn't have any kind of comic book stores around where I grew up to kind of go to. I had the little spinner racks at my local grocery store, and that was about it. And they were limited what they had. I had some Spider-Man comics here and there, but for the most part, I mean, I agree. Like there's so much excitement anymore by what's going on in film today, because just the industry has gone so farther than I think anybody really imagined it could go when it comes to technology. And these things are coming to life now that you never would have imagined. And, you could sit there and say it started way back in the day with like Star Wars or, Jurassic Park in the 90s. But I mean, I think we're so far even past that now that the filmmakers of then had no idea we would be where we're at today.
Well, and it took a long time for the fans to convince the industry that this wasn't a flash in the pan, that there are a lot of different stories that you can tell and that audiences will support. Like, it boggles my mind that, and I'll say more on the Marvel side right now, like with DC, obviously they're going to have their Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, but then we're at a stage where we're ramping up for a sequel to Doctor Strange. Like, Doctor Strange is going to have multiple movies in theaters. That the Guardians of the Galaxy are as popular as they are. That the Ant-Man's going to be a trilogy. It's crazy that these films for B and C level heroes, but I say that with all due respect, are still packing in audiences because they're just well-made, entertaining popcorn films.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, you said it best. I mean, the early 2000s where the boom kind of started, with the X-Men and the Spider-Man films, that was the first time where people were, and I think the studios were like, "Whoa, these things can actually make money," Yeah. And then the mid 2000s, there were so many different. I think they tried to do too many things too fast. You had your Fantastic Four, that Catwoman movie, and you had so much, and then by 2005, you had Christopher Nolan, who's like, "Hey, here's my Batman," and people are like, "Whoa, you could be that real with films,
Sure.
And,
yeah.
And then it just kind of built from there, and it is. I mean, luckily for us nerds or geeks or whatever you want to call us, this happened the way it did because it's a great time to be a fan of comic book characters as well as the comic book films, and especially right now, being a DC fan is incredible.
Oh, for sure. And it's really funny. Like, I've been talking about the Snyder Cut and Justice League nonstop for a year now at this point, and it's allowed me to kind of stop and analyze how important that movie has become in terms of changing the way the DC looks at their big picture superhero approach, freeing up some directors to go off and make, like James Wan took on Aquaman and essentially made the closest thing to his Flash Gordon or, Star Wars that he ever would. He turned it into an underwater science fiction film, and I think prior to or heading into Justice League, Warner Brothers wanted to get up to what Marvel Studios was doing, but didn't understand quite how to do it and didn't have the courage to completely back Zack's vision. And so that film broke their approach. But I honestly do think that they're in a pretty good place right now. And the ability for them to branch over into streaming and television, and they've always done TV pretty well with the CW shows, and now you hear this exciting things about like a Gotham City show that Matt Reeves wants to bring to HBO Max. Like, it broke them out of the, hey, we have to have a cinematic universe, and just reminded them, you have great characters with amazing stories. Give them the people who understand the characters and care about them, and let them go tell whatever type of story they want to tell.
Oh, absolutely. And I kind of blame the fans for them trying to rush and do this whole universe thing back. I sit there and I remember back in 2013, 2014 and stuff, when it was announced, hey, we're getting a follow-up to Man of Steel. It's going to be Batman vs. Superman. And I was pumped. Everybody was excited about it. Like, oh, crap, We're going to see Batman and Superman on the screen at the same time. And then it slowly turned into this, okay, they're rushing. They're rushing to make this universe. They're not taking the Marvel approach, and fans were screaming that. And I think that was kind of partially the fans' fault, because then I think they felt like, okay, you're right. We got to get we have to plan a solo movie for this. And then in 2016, when they were like, here's all these movies that are coming out, people were like, okay, finally they're getting on board with the universe. And then we're sitting here in 2020 and we see how well that all played out. Yes. But that kind of takes me to this point here is, what was the point for you that was like, hey, I want to release the Snyder Cut book? Because what I just talked about, that was a big part of, what even led to the movement.
Yeah, that's the thing. I even went into this completely unaware of how big the story was. And that's coming from somebody who covered every element of this straight through. And I have said this on multiple shows, and I honestly do believe it. The fact that I grew up as such a Marvel fan and was a Marvel supporter while also being interested in DC made me, I think, the right person to sort of tell this story, because I just came at it from the fascination of somebody who covers the film industry and said, what went wrong with this movie? Like, how could so many things be allowed to go wrong with what is going to be your first live action Justice League movie? It should be the home run that fans have been waiting for forever. And it would be a challenge to botch it, as much as they did. So you start to ask all these questions, but even like just on the surface, there are decisions that were made on Justice League that are head scratchers. When you look at the hiring of Joss Whedon to finish a Zack Snyder movie, when their voices are completely different. When you hire a guy who was, by all intents and purposes, because the Russo brothers weren't up and running at full steam yet, the biggest director in the Marvel playbook, at that point. And here he is jumping ship and coming to the rival and helping Warner Brothers and DC complete their Justice League movie. Like, all of that was just strange, sight unseen, before we even saw how Justice League was going to turn out. And then when you watch the theatrical cut, I mean, it's a disaster on so many levels that you as a film fan, you want to be like, oh, I got to find out what happened here. Like, how did this go so wrong? So I started to approach the story from that perspective of just like, what went wrong here, And it was my wife who pointed me in a different direction, who said, that's all interesting, and I get why you're fascinated with that side of the story, but I don't care about that. I more care about who are these people who are online with this hashtag. Why is this so important to them? And then once I started to explore that side of the story, the people who were so adamant to get the Snyder Cut released, and you start to noodle through it, and you start to see just how involved Zack was in the entire process, and you start to get into all of the accomplishments that were taken on by the Snyder Cut movement. Like, once you started to dig beyond, it's like the iceberg analogy, right? Like from the very bit you see the tip of it. Oh, here's people who want to see a movie that supposedly got buried, and then you dig, and it just becomes a much bigger story. And I loved telling it. I just loved telling it. So it became a book, and it sort of grew that way.
I'm not going to lie. I'm kind of jealous. About a year ago, I was sitting around with my buddies within our network, with our website, and I go, you know what I should do, or we should do? We should do a documentary on the whole Zack Snyder Justice League stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, we need to do this because it's such a big movement right now. I think it's something that people are going to watch or want to read. I think it's a great idea. And everybody laughed at me. At the website, we have, I think, about 10 or 15 people that are kind of, working on the site. And I'm the only one that was like, release the Snyder Cut, and everybody just kind of sat there and laughed at me like, oh, you're crazy. So it kind of turned into me just doing an article on the website. And it was just kind of it was a step-by-step from the research and the stuff that I could find, but I was very limited to my resources. I didn't have quite the amount of resources I'm sure you had or some other people had. And, I kind of sat there and I was going through it. And then a few months later, all this other stuff starts coming out about what happened, what was going on behind the scenes. And I go back and take a look. I'm like, wow, I mean, I wasn't completely wrong, but there was a lot of speculation that was going around the internet at the time. And I think it would be impossible to get the true what happened story. So the fact that you decided to change gears and jump and do like, okay, let's focus on the movement and what's going on there. I think that was an incredible idea because I think you're going to get a lot more people to pick this book up as opposed to saying, oh, just another, what happened to the film? Because right now we're even getting a documentary coming out probably next year about the other Justice League movie that didn't happen.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I think it's kind of, to some people, I think it's going to be, okay, so why do I care at this point? They keep screwing it up. So you went with the side of what was so important about this movement and or not what was so important, but the importance of the movement.
Well, and you start to dial into the amount of money that they've raised. I mean, obviously, I think most people know at this point, but if it's new to anybody who's listening, the reason given for Zack walking away from Justice League at the time was because of the death of his daughter, Autumn, who had died by suicide. And he wanted to essentially try to immerse himself in the work as thinking it might be the way to heal. But he came to the realization that he needed to be home with his family. And that was the reason that he stepped away from Justice League in that place. And because of that, I learned and started to pick up more about how the movement used all of their marketing efforts to raise awareness for the existence of the cut. It's so funny to go back and keep talking about this because for the longest time, you had to keep using phrases like the existence of or the possibility of, and now it's a brave new world. Now we know it's happening and we know it's coming. So that's so much more refreshing. But they would use, whenever they tried to generate attention for the existence of the cut, they also used it as a fundraising opportunity for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And once I started to learn, that and why they did that and the amount of money that they've generated, and to date, they're over $200,000 in monies raised for that. That was a component that I could not ignore, and it really did elevate it to, okay, now I need to tell their story. I have to get this out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's great that you bring that up because it's still moving. The raising of the money for suicide prevention awareness and such, that's still going on, even with JusticeCon coming up in 10 days from now. I just had the Nerd Queens and Wonder Meg on my show last week, and we talked about everything that's going on in that regard. And I did ask them. I said, I asked if you talked with them, and they said, yeah, that you did. But it's crazy because it's not stopping. Like this is a movement. Even though we won and got the movie, it's not all it was about. It's about so much more than that. And that's what is incredible about what has gone on with everything. And that's what I really look forward to seeing, how you shed light on that in your book, because I think it's going to be not humbling, but yeah, I think it's going to be eye-opening for a lot of people, to sit back and see like, wow, like, it wasn't just about a movie.
I make connections or tell stories from people in the movement who made friendships, who view themselves as family members now for life. And they credit it's like any of us that are looking for, people who share a common bond, who have a familiarity and just want to sort of geek out about the things that we love. Yeah. And a lot of people in the Snyder Cut movement found a common goal on a daily basis, with people that they wanted to get behind and celebrate the movies that they love. And what I was really blown away by is that it's a global movement. I heard from people in the Snyder Cut movement who were from every corner of the planet and all shared this deep passion for Snyder's work, for these DC characters. And it was just, it was mind-blowing. Honestly, there's no other way to put it. It was mind-blowing to find out just how much people cared about these films. And I need that sometimes as a reminder to me of how important cinema and blockbuster entertainment can be. These are characters that we all sort of grew up on, and for some of them, they're on a higher pedestal than others. But when they're really important to you, when they really matter to you, you're willing to go to great lengths to make sure that they're represented properly. And the Snyder Cut fan base has been that, if nothing else.
So what do you think, with everything that's happened and with the movement, what do you think is the biggest thing that was maybe learned from the movement, or something that could have maybe been done better with it? Because while we were successful, everybody, that's anybody who was supporting the movement, doing a hashtag, donating, all that kind of stuff. We were all part of it. So we were successful. But what do you think was learned from this, whether it's on our side or even from the studio side?
I think a big takeaway from this is how rare this is. And I say that because there's so many smaller movements right now that are trying to get that kind of traction, whether it's the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad or whether it's the Alita Army who's trying to get a sequel. And it's really, really difficult to get the attention of a studio, or a major corporation to get them to budge or make a creative decision over a business decision.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I think the Snyder Cut movement worked is because it had Zack's support. And anytime the fandom not ever really slowed down, but lost momentum or were questioning, like, are we really making any difference here? He was the first one to step in, and be like, I still believe in you guys. Don't give up. He was very encouraging on Vero, and that's why I think Vero is a significant tool in bringing this to fruition, because he had direct access to the fans themselves.
Yeah.
And if you saw Robert Rodriguez getting behind an Alita sequel, or if you saw David Ayer's doing some, and I honestly do think, and I know nothing, but I think Ayer is going to get his ability to put something together on HBO Max.
I think so too. I'm with you. I don't know anything, but I think it's happening. But
yeah, it almost seems that's going to be the way he makes it sound, is that it's going to be easier for him to put together than even what Snyder was able to do. And why not? Why not give them this alternate cut? But one of the points that I make in the book is just how long the Donner cut took to come out, and it's these things don't happen quickly. And I think everyone who is involved with the success of the Snyder Cut on the industry side is stunned at how quickly it happened. And I honestly think the only reason that it did happen is the introduction of HBO Max. If this was something where they had to wait for theatrical release, I don't think we'd be where we are right now, because especially with COVID shutting everything down and pushing back existing feature films, it would have been downright impossible to get a Snyder Cut into a theater. Maybe a DVD release. Maybe they could have put together some type of a package where people could have bought it. But I do think the advent of HBO Max, the streaming service, and all these new streaming services needing fresh original content to lure subscribers is that worked a lot in Zack's favor.
Now, speaking of Zack, and he was involved, I loved everything that he was posting on Vero, on social media, how involved he got with that. That was amazing. But how involved was he with you and your book? Did you have contact with him? Were there things that you guys discussed?
Not until the very end. Honestly, not until the very end. And not from lack of trying. I legitimately was pestering his people as best I could, going through the proper channels and going through his publicists. And there were so there were moments where I was able to go to the Justice League set back in 2016 when he was still directing it. Mm-hmm. And I had all that information and I knew the direction he was coming from, and all of that's in the book.
Is that the one? Is that when there was a whole bunch of media that went and saw the Flash scene?
Yes. Okay. Where we saw Bruce meeting Barry for the first time.
Yeah. Okay.
And he had cut that together as a reel of footage and showed it off as the first indication of what the tone of it was going to be. Mm-hmm. And it had some humor to it, obviously, and adding Ezra, I think, brought that element. But it wasn't the brunch conversation or anything like that in the theatrical. But then at one point, I got to go to the set of Army of the Dead, also the Netflix movie that he's working on. And while we were on the set of that was right around the time when I was really in the, am I going to commit to this book or not? Because I knew the book was going to be a lot of time and a lot of effort. And that was a pretty funny, the fact that I was debating whether I'm going to write a book about Zack Snyder and then get an invitation to go to his set was like the higher powers, saying, hey, idiot, pay attention. This is important. But he also talked to us at length, and it's not anything I can share because we're still under embargo kind of thing, but he talked to us at length that day about how important the Snyder Cut movement and their efforts were, and how much he needed to fill the gap on his resume that was left by Justice League. It was still very important to him. So all of these things sort of told me to keep going. But then he wouldn't talk for the book. I just kept being told he couldn't talk. And I kind of assumed it was one of two things. I thought it was either he's working on his own documentary, some type of telling about what happened, and why would he give me anything if that were the case? Or he was negotiating with the studio and didn't want to, screw anything up by giving me stuff and have me run it. But I'll say to his credit, to all the credit in the world to him, like days after the May 20th announcement, his reps got and sent me an email that just said, okay, we can talk now. And so he's in the book. I have his take on just about the entire process.
That's amazing. What do you think? I mean, we've heard it many, many times. I mean, Zack has talked about it himself a little bit, on how important the movement was, but he hasn't necessarily sat there and said, hey, this was the moment that everything changed. You'll hear on different podcasts, different websites, they'll sit there and say, oh, is that November 17th, event on Twitter and social media, the release of Snyder Cut, that was the pivotal moment. Do you believe that's what it is? Or can you maybe not talk about it because it's a big part of your book?
It's a pretty big part of the book, okay. But I honestly will tell you that I think it was all of it. Mm-hmm. I think it was the nonstop, unrelenting call for, there's a reason that the hashtag is globally known in pop culture, like there's a reason that release Snyder Cut is a punchline almost when you talk about any kind of, hey, release this version of something that we didn't get to see. It's release the JJ cut, or with that cat's CGI buttholes. It's release the butthole cut. Like it's a joke and everybody knows, but they know because the movement was rabid, and just making sure that their message was heard for 3 straight years. So yeah, I think November 17th was a significant achievement. But I also think it was all of them leading up for the 3 years.
Yeah. So if I read this correctly on Twitter, it seems like you announced the other day that the book was finished.
Yes, the book is finished. I did have a very close confidant read it through start to finish, gave me some last minute notes. And so I'm taking this upcoming weekend to add those things in. But yeah, I'd say 99% finished, going to the publisher on Monday, which is the Monday, what is that date? 18th, 9th, 20th, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's coming.
Now, was there a thought on waiting until the movie came out to finish the book?
That's a great question. No. Here's the thing with this story. You could keep saying, all right, maybe I'll just include this, but sooner or later, I'm going to have to be content with the fact that I told the story that I could from point A to point whatever B is going to be. Mm-hmm. And this is a never-ending story. Like, that's the thing about this movement, is they're constantly doing other things. You said it doesn't end with just the release of the movie, and you're right. And just as an example, Ray Fisher comes out and starts to talk about Joss Whedon. And I think, like, should I delay and start to include this? But sooner or later, the baton's going to have to get passed to somebody else. Like, someone else is going to have to take up a story and either talk about more of the fallout, or I'm sure there's going to be plenty of analysis, obviously, of the thing. But the book that I decided to write was never about, it's not about what the movie ends up becoming. It really was about, there was an injustice, done to Zack. There were a lot of fans that were upset about it, and it was a far larger number of people than you would have thought. They were far more organized than most other fan bases are. They had the support of their director, and these are all the reasons why they did it. These are all the incredible things that they accomplished in addition to getting the movie coming out. And even before I knew that HBO Max was going to do it, like, my ending was still a legitimate ending. It was like, look, when you have Momoa tweeting that he's seen it, when you have Gal and Ben using the hashtag, like, they had accomplished so much already, even before we crossed the finish line, kind of thing, that I thought the book could stand on its own. But it's got a better ending than I could have hoped, because I never would have dreamed that this would have happened when I started.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I would love to see what happens with, or, I mean, I'm going to see it. I'm living it. I'm going to see what happens in the movement, leading up to the release and even after the release. But, just having it written down, I think, would be really cool. So is there any idea or thoughts that maybe, okay, I put that aside? I know you said, somebody else can take the reins here, but is there any thought of, okay, maybe I'll tackle it again a year or two down the line to see where it's at?
For sure. I mean, I guess I want to see how the book is received, and if I could do like a second edition almost, where you add in some stuff like that, or if enough stuff piles up, if there's a lot more to the story and it warrants a follow-up, I am completely content to stay in this world and keep telling the story of the movement. But one element that I really didn't choose to focus on, because I didn't want the book to be about this, is the infighting. It's the division amongst the fans within the fandom. And I think people could honestly, if they wanted to put their investigative hats on and get to the bottom of some of the stuff that's going on with that, that's a book, that's a story that I think people would read, maybe for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. But there is a side to, I don't want to use the word toxic fandom, but there is a side to people who get involved in social media and fandom and campaigns like this for the wrong reasons. They're not in it for the art. They're not in it to support the artist. And I was kind of fascinated by those people. But the more I talked to them, the more I kind of realized that they don't, how do I say this? Their belief system isn't nearly as strong as the people who were in it for the idea of artistic integrity, or the idea of standing up for Zack and Debbie, and that entire family. Other people who I spoke to who just wanted to stir the pot, not to quote Michael Caine, but there are people who just want to see the world burn, and they're content to get on social media and kick the hornet's nest and then keep moving. It doesn't bother them. So that just wasn't a story that I wanted to tell, but that story is still out there. It could be told by someone else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the book, I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to it. I mean, the moment I heard about it, I was like, this is a must buy for me. I'm sure with it going to the publisher next week, I'm sure you're still ways away from even announcing when the release date will be, but is there any kind of idea of like a roundabout, like beginning of the year, end of year type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really chomping at the bit now to get it in people's hands. One of the problems of Cinemablend is we write a story, we publish, and people can read it ASAP. this is going to take longer, and I understand. I'm learning the ins and outs of the publishing world, and they have to announce schedules far in advance. Also, it has to go through an editing process, and I guess I'm prepared for my editor now to come back and just gut it completely and tell me to rewrite. But anyway, we'll find out. I know that they would really love to, for obvious reasons, time it to the release of Zack's movie or television show on HBO Max. So we need to kind of know when that's going to be. I wonder if that announcement will come at Fandom, at DC Fandom, right? Do you think maybe they'll give us a release date?
I'm hoping. I mean, we got Justice Con as well. I mean,
yep. Very true. Very true.
Either one. I know there's been a lot of alluding to different announcements being at each one and different things when it comes to his cut of the film, as well as the actors and actresses involved. I know that there's a lot of surprises that we have in store coming up over the next 6-8 weeks. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope that we get an announcement. That would be nice. It'd
be fantastic. And the thing about Zack too is he's such a wild card that he knows how to stage a show, like that. Even the Man of Steel viewing party leading into having Henry show up for that, having the fans jump on and be part of it, the eventual reveal of the black and white photo, all of that was great. It's so Zack. So here's what I'll say of my hope for the book. I would love it to be out in the first quarter of next year. I would love for Zack's Justice League to be on HBO Max in first quarter and have the two of them run tandem. But even if Zack were to give us a date and say it's going to be, and I would hate this, but October or November of next year, because of production reasons or because of, he needs more time, whatever it should be, I would ask my publisher, I'd push my publisher to go earlier, to give people a chance to read it, to figure out what happened, hype up people for the release of, the Justice League movie coming to HBO Max. So we'll see. But believe me, because nothing's more frustrating, encouraging and frustrating than to get tweets and messages from people on social media saying, when can I pre-order? Because I'm thrilled that they have any interest in the book at all, but I want to be able to give them an answer. And unfortunately, it's out of my hands. So as soon as I have it, believe me, I will share it with everybody.
Excellent. One final thing, the cover that I'm guessing this is going to be the cover. I mean, this is kind of the image that's been shared around a good bit with the blue and yellow sky, the skyline. That is amazing looking. I absolutely love that look. Is that the planned cover?
That is the planned cover. And that is by Nick Ingram, an artist who, so I just sort of solicited people who I saw were in the poster competition that were on Vero. And I knew I wanted to do, I really like that Art Deco style. BioShock uses it a ton. You see it in artworks and prints, and I've always just admired that. And I went out to a couple of different people and said, hey, I really like this Art Deco style. I showed them some World's Fair posters from places like Chicago and San Francisco and said, if you were to design a cover for the Release the Snyder Cut movement, and I gave them no real direction. I just said, I wanted to say something about Justice League. I want to say something about Snyder Cut visually. How would you guys present it? And I got a bunch of really amazing submissions back from people. And it was very tough, but I loved what Nick came up with. And the only change that I gave him was that the globe at the top of the skyscraper, he had a globe to make it more look like the Daily Planet. And I gave him the idea of turning that into the canister, the film canister. And so, but he had the silhouettes, and we talked about color back and forth, and we added some color to each of the Justice League members, and he did an amazing, amazing job. And so, I got ahead of myself. I put the cart before the horse, and I was like, dude, this is my cover. I love it. And then I was like, I probably have to ask my publisher now. And so I asked them, and they were like, that's normally something we design. But if you have something that you like, you can show us and we can consider it. And I showed them that cover, and they were like, oh yeah, this is great. So, so it's not final, but as far as I'm concerned, yes, that's my cover. And I'm going to push for that for every step of the way.
Excellent. Kind of wish there was a little Green Lantern somewhere there, but that's it.
Yeah, true. Unite all 7 of them.
Yeah, but excellent, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Sure.
I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to this. Now, we talked about it. You're at Cinemablend and everything, but where can people find you? What is your podcast? All that kind of stuff. Where can people find you?
Sure. So all my content goes on Cinemablend on a daily basis. I'm the managing director over there. So come to us on a daily basis for your movie and entertainment needs. My podcast is called Reel Blend, REEL Blend, and I host it with two other really close friends of mine, Jake Hamilton and Kevin McCarthy, who are longtime film journalists and veterans of the junket circuit, where we've been doing celebrity interviews for decades. And it's fun to just sort of sit on a podcast weekly and BS with those guys. I do have a Twitter account for the book. It's at RTSC, at RTSC book. And so any kind of updates about release dates and any new covers or anything that gets sort of submitted that way, we post it to that account constantly. I'm also on Sean_O'Connell. So either of those two places, you can follow me on social media, and I'm pretty active. I'm pretty active on there too. So.
Excellent, man. Thank you so much. I hope that maybe even once it comes out, when I get a chance to sit down and read it, maybe I can get you back on the show and we can discuss everything that's in there. Because I'm sure there's a good bit that you would love to talk about, but you just can't yet. So.
Absolutely. Robert, I would come back anytime, honestly, man. This was great. Thank you so much. Really great questions. And I'm just at the point now where I just hope that people like the book. I hope that I did the movement proud. That's my biggest concern.
Excellent. Perfect. And so far in my book, you've done great. So keep it going.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
No problem. And you have a good day, man. And there you have it, everyone. That was my conversation with Sean O'Connell. Again, thank you, Sean, for being on the show. I absolutely love that you took the time out of your day to come on to my little lonely podcast here and discuss something like this book. It's going to be fantastic when it comes out. I hope it does come out sooner than later, but regardless, I am going to be in line waiting for it to come out. If you happen to go do any signings, I'll be there, man. I will be there, because this book, I think, is going to be fantastic. It's going to shed some light on the importance of what the release of the Snyder Cut movement was all about. It wasn't just about releasing a movie. Yes, that was a big part of it, but there is so much more behind that movement than simply getting a movie released. And I've been talking about it for months. I hope you all are listening. This book is truly going to reveal everything, and you will truly see that this movement is so important in so many different ways. Now, if you loved what you heard here, jump over to Spoilerverse.com. That's where you're going to find all the episodes of Bridging the Geekdoms. You can also jump to your favorite podcatcher app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever. Look up Bridging the Geekdoms. Make sure you find the one that actually has a picture of the bridge. There's a little bridge, just a black and white photo, has a little monster hiding over on the side. As long as you got that picture, that's our podcast. Hit subscribe and follow. Still working out the details on trying to get rid of that other feed that's up there. We're trying to get that done as soon as possible so we stop confusing people. But please, find us, follow us, subscribe, like us. Big things are happening here at Bridging the Geekdoms, as well as the Spoilerverse, and we want you all to be a part of it. If you want to see what else is going on in the Spoilerverse, jump over to the website, Spoilerverse.com. There are some great shows over there. Spoiler Country, the flagship show of the network and the website. They talk to some of the greatest creators and minds within the comic, movie, and TV industry. You then have Polygon Warriors. That is my co-host on Bridging the Geekdoms, Colton Payne. That's his other show. That's his video game show. Fantastic show, and we have a really cool thing planned with that, so make sure you jump on that so you can be part of what's coming there. You have Shooting the Sith, the premier Star Wars podcast, hosted by yours truly for the website, as well as so much more. So make sure you jump over to Spoilerverse.com for all that. Finally, everyone, we need some people to help us out at the website. We're doing a lot. Big things are happening, so we want you to join us. If you go onto the site, up in the top menu bar, you're going to see a little option that says Join Us. Click that. You'll see what we're looking for, and you can just kind of apply. You can apply to work at Spoilerverse in some form or fashion. Help us out with articles. Get some knowledge within the podcast field. Editing, being part of the show, producing, stuff like that. So jump over, click that link, click that option, tell us what you want to do, and maybe we can get you to be part of the Spoilerverse family. With all that said, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for joining in. I hope you truly enjoyed the conversation that Sean and I had. I'm looking forward to his book. I hope you all are as well. Sean, thank you so much again for being on my show, and I look forward to talking to you again. I've been following you on Twitter for a bit now, and yeah, I love what you're doing. I love what you're doing over at Cinemablend. I could only hope to one day be as big as Cinemablend, but thank you so much for everything that you've done and what you've done for the movement. What that book is a big part of that movement now, so thank you very much. With all that said, I will talk at all of you next week.